I call this Sebastian Budget Review Advisory Committee to order at 6:01 p.m. on Monday, July the 11th. Let's all stand and have a Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's have a roll call, please.
Yes. Mr. Napier.
Present.
Mr. McGinn.
Present.
Ms. Serta.
Present.
Mr. Newhart.
Present.
Mr. Hill.
Hall.
I'm sorry, Hall. I don't know why I want to do that.
Change that I to an A.
Sorry. And Ms. Reed is not.
Two, we've got excused as Mr. Hoffman and Mr. Sullivan.
Is Ms. Reed on Zoom?
Is anybody on Zoom?
No, sir.
Okay.
Nobody? Nobody on Zoom?
All right.
Okay, next on the agenda. Did you get those two excused ones? Okay. Approval of the minutes. I hope everybody's had a chance to see them, and I'll go first on page 4 of those minutes under my comments. I've been a proponent of using recreation impact fees at the golf course for 2 years. So to say that I didn't want them used at the golf course is incorrect. Those impact fees, I've asked for the recreation impact fees to be used at the golf course. And you've got here in the minutes it says at the golf course, capital improvements at the golf course rather than using recreation fee money.
I may have misheard what you said, and I will change.
Yeah, I'm a proponent of using recreation impact fees at the golf course.
Okay.
So we need to correct that, help it a little bit. Did everybody else get a chance to look at them? That's the only thing I saw. Anybody else have any? Okay, I'll accept a motion to approve.
Second.
Well, you make the motion.
I'll second.
He made the motion and Amber made the second.
Mr. Chair,
All
make the
those-
motion as amended.
What's that?
Make the motion to approve as amended.
Yes, as amended. Is the way I stated it. All those in favor signify with aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Those minutes pass unanimously. Presentation of draft budget by Mr. Kilgore, the CFO. Ken, you're on, buddy.
Good evening. Good to see y'all. So I have kept the presentation kind of in the same format as I've done in past years. And always open to additional questions, but you do have the entire budget document that we've got as a draft at this point. So I will highlight, things that are included and things that are not yet included. So I'll go through the general fund budget, the enterprise and other funds, a brief slide on the capital improvement program. We'll talk about property values changes and then the possible millage rates, and then add some other comments and things to consider. The draft was submitted to you, includes an increase of personnel cost, operating expenditures, capital spending, and basically a credit because we had large transfers out of general fund in this year. It makes it look like we're reducing transfers, but actually there's no transfers in next year's budget out of general fund. But if you sum all that up, the increase at this point is 3.18%. We are making assumptions in that the health insurance would only be a 5% increase. We are expecting estimates from the insurance company practically any day now to give us a closer number to what might be a starting point for negotiations. We are underway with the negotiations on the labor contracts. We do include 6 full-time positions in the general fund budget. We are adding 1 part-time position, but we're also deleting 1 part-time position. So these are the full-time additions. The part-timer is mechanic in the garage, and the part-time that we're deleting is a clerical assistant in the city clerk's office. That position was added in the past to help catch up on the scanning in of old records and whatever, and they feel like she's caught up or got on top of it now, so she's gone to another position, so they are figuring they can do without that part-time slot for now. The additions are the city manager's assistant, an assistant in human resources for that 1-person operation, 3 police officers, and a construction specialist. So operating costs are up to $243,817, and there's a couple of areas that centers in the MIS department. They added their cost of the software to counter cybersecurity, and also the public works complex additional expenses. So capital's up only $75,861, and that's mostly from additional parks equipment over what we had in the current year. The fund transfers, as I mentioned, is mostly the Yacht Club seawall project. It was in this year that it's not being, of course, reappropriated next year. Assumptions were made on the revenue. We are using in the draft document a millage of 2.8658. That would be 6.8% above the rollback rate. And we'll get into more specifics on that in later slides, but we needed that in order to balance the current amount of expenditures and to the amount of revenue coming in, the new revenues. Franchise and utility taxes are coming in strongly, 9.3% above this year's budget based on the projection. State revenues are 22.3% above this year's. And as Paul and I have discussed, and he pointed out actually that a lot of the state revenues and the intergovernmental revenues are population driven and would like the half-cent sales tax. They're driven by the purchase price, percentage of the purchase prices. So naturally, as inflation increases the purchase price, then our revenues are going to increase corresponding to that. But will that last? And that's our concern. So I did use a more conservative approach for next year's projections. I assumed we would get what we have in the bank for the first 9 months or 8 months of this year, and then assuming the remaining months of this year will be the same as the year before. So if that 22% increases the next, or stays true, or the next 2 or 3 months, we'll have an advantage there, and of course, that'll carry forward into the following year. But I only assume next year then would increase by 3% over this year. Thing to keep in mind is the total revenue, property taxes, franchise fees, utility taxes, and state revenues make up 91.4% of our total revenues for general fund. So it's the old 80-20 rule, I guess. You spend 20% of your time on 80% of the revenues. Golf course is doing well this year. The projections you saw in the budget document assume that will flow into next year. In my long-term projections and on the back sheets of the budget where I forecast future years, I've actually reduced that projection for next year down 15%. That's about $250,000, assuming there is a drop-off. If not, fine, but just to be on the conservative side. Same $30,000 for the restaurant lease, same amount of the airport rent. They are paying down the principal and interest on the initial $700,000 building fund loan. We hope there'll be, it's looking pretty good for them to start paying at least $35,000 towards the general fund loan. We are anticipating that we'll have another year on the golf carts, but because of delivery times and production schedules, we will probably be ordering the golf carts in this coming year for delivery to be in place for the next year. One thing I was asked to point out is that in the golf course, there's a pretty large amount, $116,672 is budgeted for next year, and that's to help general fund recover its cost of personnel and that we incur. Theoretically, the golf course would be hiring accountants, they'd be hiring an HR function to cover, and purchasing. So all those services they get for the $116,000, but it is a major or significant part of their operating costs. Airport also looks healthy. They're paying the loan that they had taken from the discretionary sales tax for the hangar A and B. Those balances, the way that was amortized, it was very heavy on paying very little towards principal initially because we were anticipating that their revenues would increase with those improvements, but we weren't wanting to be too optimistic on that. The airport gets a lot of support from the DST fund. In 2023, we've got square hangars budgeted, and half of the rehabilitation on runway 0523. The other half will, of course, come in 2024. In the following 4 years, they've got scheduled the rest of the runway 523, taxiway Alpha Apron, taxiway Golf, Shade Hangar, and runway 1331. So you've got all the details. You can kind of see a little write-up on all of those projects. Can't complain about the building fund. Permit revenue still continues at high levels. It's above the amounts that were budgeted. It's certainly covering the personnel and operating cost. They did add 2 additional slots in the building department budget. Difficulty that they have is the filling of positions. For that category of position, the market is really hard at our pay rates and whatever to attract the new employee. So they got a couple of positions in hopes that they can be hired. They would get the repayments of the golf course loans by the end of September of this year. The loan would be still $553,963 from the initial $700,000 loan. And then presumably after they get that paid down, they could look towards the other loan that was made for cash flow purposes to the golf course of $559,684. Several more years like they've been going this last year, they should be fine. Just wanted to remind you on the American Rescue Act, we have received all the funding, and we've allocated the monies to the Gardenia Ditch, Schumann Drive, Contra Dam, employee retention payments, and road improvements. This has to be obligated by December 31st, 2024, and totally spent by December 31st of 2026. The employee retention payments, of course, have been paid out, but the improvement projects is going to take some time to get all the plans and permitting that are necessary for the construction projects. Local option gas tax, the collections this year are only up 3.03%. I'm sure that's not going to get much better because as the price of gasoline increases, the amount of fuel purchased is probably less, and that tax is based on so many cents per gallon. It's not a percentage of the price. So it's not unexpected that we see some only a modest increase in that revenue source. We are hoping to get the road assessment study shortly, probably within the month, so we may be able to firm that up, hopefully before the budget is approved. We've gone ahead and allocated $250,000 a year for reconstruction of roads, $600,000 for repaving, and $75,000 a year for sidewalks. So when you look at the long-term forecast on the local option gas tax, you see those amounts repeated each year. In addition, we've got the $500,000 in the American Rescue Funds, don't forget, so that is available to supplement that. So we eagerly anticipate what the road assessment study tells us our suggested needs are. The final payment on the bank note for the gas tax is due on December 1st of this year. So we'll be out of that debt. Discretionary sales tax. Collections are up 20.5%. Same as I did in the general fund for the half-cent sales tax. I reduced my projection and then projected for the following year for a 3% increase. My statement is incorrect there. I'm sorry. I should have struck that. The renewal date on the gas tax is what's that? Oh, on the discretionary sales tax, 20. No, it's beyond that. I'm sorry. I actually verified with the county on that because I had incorrect notes. I'll have to get that information out to y'all. It's several years out yet, so. When I first misread it, I was thinking it would be next year. I thought, why isn't the county doing something to initiate it? But it's, I will get that date. So as we've done and are required to do, we've spent that on infrastructure type expenditures as well as expenditures that are related to the police department. And we use it, as you saw, for matching FAA and FDOT grants for the airport. The Riverfront CRA Fund, we have the normal operating type expenses budgeted for that, as well as our allocation for support of special events, kiosk signs in 2023, and Riverfront event space out in 2025. The Recreation Impact Fee Fund, we have $5,000 per zone that's allocated for things that just aren't anticipated, things that come up during the year that the Parks and Rec Board can go ahead and authorize spending on. We are anticipating at the Harbor Lights site that we can install a swing and bench park. And that'll be coming this next year if approved. And there's playground and park improvements scheduled 1 or 2 each year out to the futures. In the Stormwater Utility Fund, we did have an additional inspector position that was put into the budget. But when we went to look at the forecast on the Stormwater Fund and its revenues, we did go ahead and cut 2 of the maintenance worker slots that are currently budgeted. Pardon? Sure, Paul.
So when we originally added these additional maintenance workers last year, we added 3 to stormwater because they were anticipating doing most of the work in-house. But since then, we've contracted out and put out new bids for our concrete work, for our driveways. So the majority of that work is now going to be done with contracted labor instead of in-house labor. So it's not necessarily a full function of the fundability, but it's the practicality. If we're going to use outside force to do that work, then I didn't feel it was necessary to keep all 3 of those positions in the budget, so we cut 2 of those. Thank you.
Okay. So did you have several improvement projects scheduled? Go through those again. The law enforcement forfeiture fund is used only for unbudgeted items. It's required by state statute that those funds be specifically approved by the city council every time the police department sees a need to acquire additional equipment. The parking in lieu of funds currently got a balance of about $87,000. Probably by the end of this year, with the amortized payment plans that we have, there will be an additional $10,000 or so by the end of 2022. Cemetery Trust Fund, we're operating under the older ordinance that says half the sales have to be applied to just the operation and maintenance of the cemetery, and the other half has to be on expansions or cost incidental to adding future sites. So with the expendable portion, we have the columbarium niches scheduled for 24-25. The operation and maintenance portion is going for grounds improvements, chain link fencing, and a replacement of a mower. We are looking at a rate adjustment at the cemetery for those fees. They are lagging behind, I guess, our competitor cemeteries. Just a summary of the debt service. I share this with you when I present the quarterly report, but we got the stormwater utility note to be paid off in May of 2022. Actually, it's been paid off, excuse me. And the local option gas tax note is due on December 1st, 2022. So we've got a couple of 60-month lease purchase arrangements, but otherwise our debt is quickly being eliminated from any outside parties. So in some cases we save interest, we save the cost of getting the note and all the consultants that are involved in the outside financing. A real brief summary of the capital improvement program. Over the 6 years, we'll be spending $55.1 million. Next year is budgeted at $20.3 million. Some of the larger items that are in the capital improvement program are the stone crop drainage, the canal restoration, square hangers, and runway 523. Just a note of that $20 million, about 70% of it, $14.2 million, is funded by grant monies. Correct. That's only looking at the amount for next fiscal year. So now I wanted to discuss property values and the millage rates. The rollback millage is 2.6834. We used the 2.8658 for the draft budget to get it in balance. The certified taxable values actually increased $232 million, or 14.64% above last year's values. So we had a very large increase in property values. When you break that down and you look at the amount of additions, the additions were $47.9 million. So that's a 3.03% growth over last year's tax roll, just from additions. But reassessments to last year's roll are $184 million. So that's an 11.61% increase in reassessments and changes in values over what over those properties that were on the rolls last year.
Hey, Ken? Ken,
Yes.
while you're still on that page,
Mm-hmm.
on the last bullet there, the last year's millage rate was 3.0043, with increased revenues by that amount over the 2.6834 millage currently assumed
That's a misstatement.
in the 2023 budget. But I thought we were assuming 2.8658.
You are correct, yes.
I'd like to see the 2.6834 in there.
No, that was a good catch. It should have been, and I'll make that change for future slides. Good catch. So this is the history of tax roll additions going back to 2012. You can see that the $47.9 million is higher than any other year that we've had since that point in time. Now, I'll double check that statement at the bottom of that page because I'm not sure about that now. Yeah, I actually had.
That means subconsciously we want to use rollback rate.
Yeah, to be more clear, if you go with the rollback rate, that would have added $106,475 total additional revenue over the prior year. If you bump it up and go with the 2.8658, that would add the 106 plus about $318,000 for $424,609 total. And if you keep the same rate as last year, you would be adding $666,000 more than last year's revenue. So I apologize for those mistakes. So looking on an individual basis for a homesteaded property with an assessed value that was $200,000 last year, under Save Our Homes, they would increase 3% because inflation's higher than 3%. It's always 3% or the lower of the inflation rate. So with a homesteaded property, $200,000 property would increase at the 2.8658 about $4. That's for the year. And skipping down to the $300,000 assessed value property, homestead property would decrease actually $9, and that's because of the rollback rate. At the same millage as last year, the increase would be an $18 annual amount for the $200,000 property and a $27 amount for the $300,000 property. For those not protected by homestead, the $200,000 property this past year would increase to its max of 10%, or could increase up to 10%, and they would pay additional $29 a year at the 2.8658, or $60 a year at the same rate as this year, which is the 3.0043. A $300,000 property last year could increase as much as $45 at the 2.8658, or $90 for the year for the 3.0043. So when you talk about percentage increases, it looks like a monumental increase in the rate, because we'll have to advertise that with the rollback regulations. But in terms of impact on the particular taxpayer, maybe not so much. So I did this chart to kind of show our history of going either at or below the rollback rate for the past 16 years. And 11 of those years, we were successful in keeping it at rollback or less. We've had 68.8% of the time that we've done that, or been successful at doing that. So our track record is good. You can see that since 2015, it's 22% lower at the rate that we levied in this past year. So final comments and considerations. Just a reminder, labor agreements are not yet negotiated, so we can't get into that discussion. We did add the 6 positions in general fund, cut the 2 positions in stormwater. Should have been clearer there too, and said we did add the 1 inspector position. Prices, at the time I wrote this slide, I said continue to increase. What you read in the publications and literature recently is they think maybe we're at the high of the price increases, but who's to know?
Hey, Ken, could you explain the 11.9%, 96%? That percentage is derived how?
We take the rate we're going to levy or propose to levy, and that'll be set by the city council. You know what they're proposing as a millage. You can come down below that, no harm, no foul. But if you go anything above the proposed rate, then you've got to go through some additional steps, and depending how much above, you've got to have certain, more than just a majority of the council go along with it and so forth. But we are required to advertise the proposed rate in the newspaper, and the calculation is that you take the proposed rate divided by, or as opposed to the rollback rate. So the rollback of the 2.6843 compared to the 3.0043 is actually 11.96%. Well, that was the point, and that's why I showed that other slide, that even if you levy that rate, the actual impact on the homeowner because of the Save Our Homes homesteaded properties are pretty much protected. Well, they are protected. And then even commercial property, or those that are not homesteaded, they do have the cap of a 10%. So their assessment could increase 10%. So even if we have an increase in the millage, it's not a huge impact on the dollars they'd actually be paying. So that sums it up for what I had prepared. Before I forget it, I did want to mention on our budget calendar that I had published in the earlier, there has to be a change for the first public hearing on the millage at the city. It won't change your schedule, but on September, it was scheduled for September 19th for the first public hearings, and I'm needing to change that to September 13th. You know, from the date that they provide us the DR 420, our certified taxable values, we have so many days that we have to do certain steps. And I had miscalculated by 1 day when I set the September 19th date for the city council to have the first hearing. And so I have worked with the city clerk and established that September 13th at a special meeting might be the only option to stay in compliance. We are scheduled next week. That was to consider the third quarter financial report and for y'all to maybe have some time to think the presentation and the material is over and come up with a recommendation to the city council as far as the proposed millage rate that you think would be appropriate for them to set. Once again, it doesn't mean that'll be the one we actually levy at the end of the day, but it puts a cap on it, but it doesn't hurt to leave some room for contingencies or unknowns that all of a sudden slap us in the face. Any additional questions? I'd be glad to
Ken,
try to field.
I don't have my calendar with me. Do you know what day that is next week?
It is a Monday, yeah.
Monday, the 18th is Monday.
I may have
Well, that'd be,
to excuse-
the 13th is on a Monday, yes.
Okay.
But there again, that's for the city council special.
September
Yes.
13th is actually a Tuesday.
I'm sorry?
I think the September 13th is actually a Tuesday.
Yeah.
Is it? You are correct. Okay, it is a Tuesday. And then the final hearing will be on their regular meeting, September 28th.
Is that it?
That's my 2 cents.
Okay. Questions or comments by members? I'll start with Amber.
How in September minimum wage goes up, are we doing anything to combat that? Or, because I know that's just going to continue to increase.
Yeah, we do have a compensation study that's been completed,
It is completed, okay.
and that's part of the negotiations that we'd be
Okay,
having to do all those things we need to comply. So.
okay, so do you anticipate that affecting the budget? I mean,
It's hard to say. We've had initial meetings with the bargaining units, but there's
Okay.
things going on there that's taken some time to resolve on their end. So.
okay. I think all the other questions I had you answered, so I'm good now.
Okay. Harry?
I have a few questions. The budget being proposed, the draft, which shows right now, 2.8658 millage. That balances the budget. That still leaves us with a fund balance of how much? Project.
Yeah, we are doing well on the fund balance, but the question is whether you apply that to anything that's an ongoing expense. You know, that's a big,
Yeah,
No.
that's what I was getting at, because we haven't got, labor agreements taken care of yet, and a few other things that might come down the pike.
Please turn on your mic.
It's on. Can you hear me?
Thank you, sir.
I had a question on roads. We've got, 500,000 budgeted a year for roads?
we have 500 out of the American Rescue Funds for this coming year, or before the December 2024 deadline. And we've got 600,000 for resurfacing out of gas tax monies, plus 250,000 out of gas tax for improvements.
And that is currently meeting our needs or falling short or
Well,
being ahead of our needs or?
we had commissioned a paving management program
Okay.
to be prepared by the consultant, and the last I checked with the city engineer, she said that she was hoping to get it by the end of this month. So hopefully we'll have that in time before the final budget approvals to actually see if that funding is sufficient or
Yeah, because
not.
that could possibly impact us.
Let me just expand on that a little bit if I could. So back 3 years ago, I had the pavement management program instituted where we evaluated every roadway in the city. And we gave it a pavement index evaluation score. And from that, we developed a 6-year paving program. And we've been following that for 3 years. What we do now is in the year 3, which is where we are now, the start of the 4th year, we do a new evaluation. For 2 reasons. One, we want to know if the implementation process that we put in is either maintaining our pavement condition index or it's getting better. If it's getting worse, then we need to look at another management tool to add in there to try to keep us either at the 74%, which is really good actually. When people say our roads are terrible, our pavement condition index averages about 74, which is in the good range. We want to make sure we're maintaining that 71, 74 percentage rates. If it's dropping down because of the program, then because our roads are getting worse, then we need to look at a different process. But we won't know that until we get the final study back from the pavement management company.
Okay. And we'll get updated on that? The advisory council will get updated on that when it's
So
available?
what we'll do is we'll ask council to adopt a new 6-year pavement management plan based on this 3rd year, 4th year study, and that will give us a program telling us how we need to move forward. That's how we're really going to determine what our funding rates should be, and then council will need to decide how much they need to add or maybe not have to add. We won't know until we get those numbers.
Got a few questions on a few pages in the budget. We could do about page.
What's that?
We could do some of my questions by page in the budget.
You don't plan on going through the budget page by page, do you?
No, I just had a few pages I had some questions on.
Well, if you got a question on those pages, now's the time to ask it.
That's what I want to clear with the board members here. On page 2, the electric franchise fees are budgeted, as revenues coming in quite a bit higher than even what's projected for this year. And that's because of, why?
So they had a huge increase in utility rates this year, and then it trims off a little bit the next few years. But this current year was the first year where they had a fuel adjustment and a rate adjustment. So that's why you'll see an increase in franchise fees here, but not so much in the next few years.
Okay. And on page 3, what is RRD management fees?
That was my question, too.
That's right. The Riverfront Redevelopment
Riverfront
Agency.
Okay.
Yeah, we should change that.
And it's going down, project the revenues to go down because,
Well, what we actually do is look at the percentage of the directors, the assigned staff member who's the director of the CRA, our community development director, and we look at her percent of time that she devotes to CRA matters as opposed to general planning and zoning type matters. So her percentage did drop.
I had a question on the code enforcement fines. You got a projection of 61,000. Is that what's collected, or?
It's based on the amounts we've collected to date. I believe that is the amount we had at the point in time I prepared the budget, so.
Because I see it's,
I mean, historically, it's not been that high, but we've had a good year.
yeah, the trend has been quite a bit lower. That's why I was wondering if, what might have been driving that.
Well, we had a couple properties that sold that had some pretty extensive liens against them, and we're waiting for one now that's like a $29,000 lien that sold that we're dealing with the title company on. We've had a couple out there that's had some pretty significant liens.
Okay.
And this does represent collections. It's not just the amount we billed for liens.
Just a few more. Page 5, facilities maintenance. The expenditures are budgeted considerably higher than this year or projected.
Yeah, I did comment on that on one of the slides, but it's because we are opening up the new public works facility. There's the electric bill proposed for that facility, those additions to what we're paying now under the old facility. So it did go up substantially, yes.
Is
An expansion to the
recurring, or is it some one-time charges, or?
Oh no, there's some reoccurring because the cleaning fees for the cleaning company. You know, you've got a huge facility out there. We put all of the electric bills that were spread out over different departments and put them all under facilities. So you'll see that they're not charged to stormwater, and they're charged to every little department. All those funds were put into one fund to be able to manage it better. And then the increase in staff to facilities, because we're just increasing facilities and we're trying to manage those programs and trying to manage these facilities in a better way. So the additional personnel, you're going to see that cost as well. That helps.
Page 33. There's a large increase, well, not real large, but an increase in the R&M office equipment for the MIS.
I think Barbara's in.
What was the question?
Barbara's here, but I think a lot of that are the software, the annual maintenance fees on a lot of the software that we carry. And some of that is related to cybersecurity. She may want to elaborate.
Hi. The biggest thing is, one, we incurred a new building, which has a lot of technology inside of it, and we had to add some cybersecurity and some connection to the building, and there's some ongoing costs. And almost all our hardware and software is going to what they call as a service. So unfortunately, we're incurring monthly bills for a lot of those services now instead of paying a right out front fee.
And part of that what you're talking about is going to be covered also under dues and memberships?
Yes. It all depends on how they word it, where it ended up in the line item.
I see there's, going from 23,000 to 95,000.
A lot of that is an upfront cost for a Public Works ticketing and monitoring system, so we can bring Public Works and the other facilities up to date and get them an actual digital system, so we can actually start making sure that things are getting addressed appropriately. There's about $60,000 and an upfront cost for the first year for that.
And 60,000 for, I'm sorry, I didn't catch all that.
The initial cost to get that program up and running and set up for all the departments is $60,000 the first year.
So that would be like a one-time,
Yes,
not a recurring?
that's correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think I only have two more. Page 43. Under the Law Enforcement Trust Fund, do we have any canines that the police might need? And if so, have you considered maybe using this fund for the canines?
We don't have any anticipated purchase of any additional canines at this time. We have 3, and that's about the extent of where we're going with canines at this point. I don't think we're going to add any additional. We just purchased 2 new animals to replace 2 that are retired. So I think we're in a good spot with our canines.
Okay. I only bring it up because some agencies aren't aware that you can use this fund to replace retiring canines. They don't have to be additional. That's one exception they made to the fund that
I believe that's been done here in the past. I think when we had...
Because they don't consider that supplanting the budget when it comes to canines. One of the few exceptions that they have. So I just wanted to throw that out there for future reference. That's all I've got.
Dave? I'm good. You're good. Terrence?
On page 5, Ken, and I think this applies in other places in the budget, in the fleet management, how have you addressed this drastic increase in fuel? It doesn't look, looking at the numbers, it doesn't look like you've got a, within the fuel allocations, anywhere near what's happening, and it's not going to go back down, actually. So,
Well,
I think I raised this last year, too.
Yeah, the fleet management budget doesn't carry the cost of all our fuel purchases, you understand that?
Yes, I
It's
do.
charged back to the department that uses,
found it in
actually
other
uses the
places.
vehicle, okay.
Yeah.
Anybody's guess?
Did anyone look at it and say, we need a 30% increase or a 40% increase just based on cost increases?
No.
I would tend to err on the conservative side, because it's you just go on the news and you say it's not gonna, it's a significant change.
Well, I would justify not throwing a large percentage in there just for the sake of, in the past, when we've had fuel increases, we've been able to pretty much absorb it within the department's budget. Because, you know, when we look on an annual basis, we spend probably 96, 97% of what's allocated to the departments in total. And some of that is, you know, might be supplies that they presume they would have cost increases on. And we got a pretty good track record of not getting really blown away by a particular account item in a department. You know, we usually can make adjustment. And if not, we come back to the city council, and maybe that's why we use a portion of the reserve funds.
So one other thing too, that's not shown in this budget, when we built the new public works facility, 2 things we went and put in, we didn't have non-taxed off-road fuel for all of our vehicles. So when we built the new facility, we added a 5,000 gallon off-road, no tax fuel for our heavy equipment. So we're not paying fuel tax, road tax on our heavy equipment that isn't required to pay fuel tax. We purchase our fuel through a cooperative, so our prices are not the same price you see at the pump. So the drastic, it is an increase, don't get me wrong, but it's not as drastic an increase as what you see at the pump, because it's kind of like futures on the fuel. You know, they bid it, and, you know, so we're seeing some challenges, but nothing like not near as much as what you're seeing in the gas pumps that the public has to pay.
Do we know as a city, all the accounts combined, how much fuel we buy? Has anyone ever looked at it as an aggregate?
We know exactly to the gallon how much fuel we buy.
Okay.
We have a fuel monitoring system that every vehicle, we know how much every vehicle burned.
Okay.
The new system's even better. The new system will tell us when you need to have service, when you're overdue for service, it won't let you go. The new system is a lot more
And then includes
sophisticated.
the police vehicles too?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. I brought it up because I'm sure it's going to get brought up by other people besides me.
Oh, I'm sure.
The public. Thank you. That was the one I had. Harry got the rest of them upstage.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Well, I'd still like to see recreation impact fees used in the golf course, because I see DST money is used in the airport. Some of it's paid back, but not a lot of it is. I don't see any DST money going to the golf course. And they're both enterprise funds. They should be treated equally.
Well, the difference is at the airport, the DST funds, if it's a revenue generator, they have to pay it back.
Yeah.
And we did use DST funds for some of that at the golf course when they did some of the improvements. But right now, I can't use it for maintenance. So to be clear, it has to be a capital improvement project.
Exactly.
DST funds. And we don't have any capital improvements projects, major ones planned for the golf course other than replacing the netting.
You guys really think you can get another year out of those golf carts?
Well, we just spent 30.
Oh, I know the battery, but
It's
that's
a bunch of money, and it doesn't matter because I can't get them for a year anyway. If I order them tomorrow, it's going to be a year before I get them.
There's other issues with some of those carts other than the batteries.
Understood. But if you can wave a magic wand and get them here.
Oh, I know. Now, when you get to new ones, they're going to be lease purchased, right?
No, we're going to direct purchase.
We're going to buy them outright?
Because we think we're going to get a pretty penny for the ones we got because of the newer batteries.
Or we're going to switch companies, golf cart companies?
Well, what do you mean? I think we're getting into the weeds, but.
Easy go or go to Club Car?
Well, again, I think we're getting into the weeds outside of the
Yeah.
scope here, so we don't know that yet until we go out and research our
Well, you just do a
prices.
bid, right? You're gonna do a bid and then.
Well, we'll see what co-ops are out there. There's a lot of them out there, and so we'll see what Sourcewell is another one. See what kind of incentive program. So I wouldn't make a determination of what we're going to go with yet until we can make that determination. The biggest problem we have is serviceability, is because this contractor that has a contract for both Easy Go and Club Car is not able to.
These we've got now are leased, right?
Sorry?
The golf carts.
No, we pay in.
We
bought
own
them.
those.
Yeah, I think we paid them off.
The last
Yeah.
payment is in this year.
It's sometime toward the end of the fiscal year, isn't it?
It's this year, I think, July, August of this year. Just to be clear too, in the projection sheets in the back, I assumed a lease purchase kind of arrangement.
Yeah.
A outright purchase is probably doable.
I don't like carrying debt.
I have.
Yeah, you gotta
I had
repeat.
an additional question, is there anything in the budget for the coming year that would be an expense that's gonna come as a result of, the annexation agreement?
No,
Okay, so we don't have any additional cost?
no.
Okay.
Again, council has to approve that. That has not been approved, but there's no anticipated cost to the city for that.
Okay.
Well, that was all I had. I thought it was a pretty good presentation. It looks pretty well, although I like rollback. I like rollback. Let's go on to the discuss setting the proposed millage for trim purposes. Now, that just means that's what they advertise.
That's not on this,
They can lower that at the council meeting,
that's not on this
but they
agenda.
can't raise what's advertised
Yes, that's correct.
without much ado.
Yeah, in the past, we, like I said, give you time to think about it. At the next meeting, can actually take a vote or consensus or however the committee wants to handle what you would recommend to the city council.
So we're actually proposing 2.8658 for the general fund, correct? That's the number that you've used to balance the budget.
No. We're proposing at least staying with the current millage rate of the 3.0043.
So there's two different thoughts here. So the number one thought is the 2.86 is how the budget is balanced.
Right.
The trim we were asking to set it at the current rate just because we don't know what's going to happen. They can always go down.
That's the 3.
That's the 3.004. So that we would ask the council to set as the trim notice. The budget is balanced without using any reserves at the 2.8, but the rollback rate would require $300,000 from reserves to balance the budget.
Right.
So rollback, you will not have a balanced budget, plus or minus. Am I accurate, Ken?
Yes.
All right. I noticed we've got 3 new police officer positions in there. Are we below the recommended funding for the population of the city for how many police officers we have?
So
I don't know what
so
number.
I don't want to talk about it in whether we're below or above, because that's
Okay.
not a conversation. I think the biggest challenge I have is the amount of complaints I get about speeding in neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And so I would like to step up enforcement and try to make our neighborhoods safer.
Okay.
I think that is one of the biggest complaints I get. And, with coverage and people going on vacation, it's just beneficial to make sure that we're covering those neighborhoods and being able to back up our officers. We're living a different time today. And so our officer safety and our resident safety is one of our top concerns, and we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can. When our officers go there, they know they have people there to help them, and if there's a resident that needs someone there, there's someone there to respond. So those are the two big things. But I wouldn't say that we're understaffed. I just think, I think more staff would make us a little better, in a little better
That's
position.
a good reason.
I'm sorry?
That's a good explanation. I mean, I like that.
Thank you.
Larry,
But it's still, we might get closer to rollback depending on what the final values are that comes out of, the property appraiser, right?
Well, don't forget, you still got some unresolved
You already got
issues that aren't budgeted for, so.
can you put that slide back up so we all can see it, please?
That's the one you wanted, or?
Yes. Uh-huh. So right now we know the labor agreements could have an impact. Most probably will. I don't know. Myself, in a good year, I'm leaning towards the 3.0043, which can be decreased if not needed, rather than putting us right where we have to go into the general fund reserve if something came up that was out of ordinary. So,
Well, that's why they're using the 3.0043. That covers that $300-some thousand you talked about, right?
So the 2.86 covers a $300,000 deficit if we went to rollback rate. The 2.8 is what actually balances the budget as
Okay.
proposed, without the
Now,
labor
that's the same
agreement.
rate this year, right?
Sorry?
Is that the 3.0043?
That's the rate that we're at currently.
Right, right.
Okay, and that's the one I think that, personally, I think that'd be more prudent to go with that rate.
Well, that's what he's recommending.
Well, before you were talking about, you were leaning towards the 2.865.
No, I'm leaning toward 2.6. I'm still leaning to rollback.
Okay.
That hasn't changed.
All right. Okay.
That's not gonna change.
Okay, so we're out there.
I'm still at rollback. But I like his explanation about the extra police officers. That's a good idea, because I hear a lot of complaints from buddies I play golf with about people speeding through their neighborhoods.
I got a question I meant to ask earlier on police officers. Do we have body cams for the officers, or is that something that we're going to be doing?
So we do have body cams and we do have car cams.
Okay. And so we're going to have to budget for the additional body cams and then
I think I saw that
Police
in
and
there.
everything.
They got stuff in the budget for that. I saw it in there.
Yes, we did attempt to equip those new positions within the funding for the budget.
okay, good.
So I assume you're wanting the committee to vote on the recommendation of the 3.0043, right? You want us to vote on the recommendation to use that?
I thought they wanted to do that
Kim was
next
gonna have you do
meeting.
that on the 18th, but it's on the discussion item now. It's up to this board if you all want to make that recommendation now.
Is there any further discussion about the proposed millage rate?
Do we want to vote on it tonight, or do we just want to poll the board here and see where we're leaning and then
Well, let's discuss
formalize it
setting it.
next
I
time?
mean, what do you want to do? Wait till the next meeting? I don't know. We may as well get it over with now, right?
Well, Larry, my understanding, if we use the 3.0043, we recommend that, but we can always drop it back to.
Yes, that's only for trim. That's only what they advertise through the trim process. That number. They can always lower it without consequence, but if you try to raise that, you gotta send a notice out to everybody, every citizen in the city.
Yeah, I'd recommend the 3.0043.
So, I mean, it makes sense, but still my goal is to shoot for rollback.
Larry?
And do keep in mind, this is a draft of what we know at this point,
Yeah.
so
I guess
leaving some
consensus
room
of
to
the board would
change.
be okay if we don't take a formal vote. Would consensus be okay, Paul? Would you prefer us to take a vote on it?
I think consensus, but, a vote would always, your recommendation to council should probably be by voice vote.
Well, I'll entertain a motion to,
Larry, I'll move to
go
move
with the city
forward
manager and,
with the
CFO's
recommended.
recommendation.
Yeah.
I second it.
Okay. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. That motion carries unanimously.
Well, thank you for that.
I would comment that there was a statement from an old movie, I think. This is deja vu all over again. I sit here and think this is an exact replication of last year's meeting.
It has been our
Still
practice.
not finished. I mean,
Excuse me.
there's still time to sharpen the pencil.
And we've done this for years. We've set the rate at least at what the prior year was, just to have some cushion in case.
Now we're down to public comments. So do we have anybody out there in the Zoom world?
No one has raised their hand.
Okay, and no. I see one member of the public here. Would you like to make a comment to us?
Comments on what they felt on this, or just comment in general?
Did you hear what she said? Okay.
Is this open for public comment, or are you?
Yes, it's
For the
we're the
budget.
public comment on the agenda. And you're the only member of the public I see in here.
Well, I was making sure that it wasn't something that's not on the agenda.
I just wanted to see if you wanted to make a comment to us.
Well, Sherry Matthews, Sebastian, I would like just if we could give just a brief explanation on the 6 positions. I understood, I heard the one on the police officers, but I'd like to know if that clerical position was a position that's gone unfilled and found no longer needed, and that's why that one's being deleted or whatever, and then the increase of the part-time, and then the other on the HR and the assistant city manager as to how that came about, if it's a need or a want, or where that came about in coming up with this in the position. If I could get a...
Well, I assume since it made it to the budget, it's a need and not a want.
Well, I'm just wanting something
Yeah.
that's, where it came from, where it's derived from.
I would ask the city manager to respond to that.
So number one, the HR person it used to be a 4-position department, and through the 2006 and the cuts, we lost all those positions. There's, more employees, there's more things going on. We've been asked to do more with our applications and things, so it's just way too much for one person to handle with 189 employees and one HR director, when she's on vacation, there's nothing being done. With the clerical position, as Ken stated, I think that was regarding the scanning in, and they're getting caught up, so that position's not going to be needed. The assistant city manager, if you've seen my calendar and you've seen what I have to go through, it's not a want, it's a need. I just can't. If you try to get a meeting, sometimes it's like 3 weeks out because I'm just swamped and trying to, and I watch over all these projects and all these contracts, and I need someone to help with that. We've just got so many contracts going through. We're bidding out our solid waste. We've got all kinds of stuff going on in this city with these ARA funding. I'm just not going to be able to keep up with all of it on my own.
And, okay, and you feel that, I know you have a lot of directors in place and other people. I understand, I understand what you're saying, and I see that, it's just kind of surprising that, for the city of Sebastian and the number of people, and I get it, that, Winter Park is about equivalent with us, and they have an assistant city manager. There's other areas that are equivalent with our populations and what we have. However, there's things that they have that we don't.
Sherry, can you talk into the microphone more so we can hear?
Excuse me, I'm talking. But with listening to all the things and the people coming in, cutting out, and the different positions, I'm curious as to if that is a position that is needed in this budget.
And I think it is.
Okay, and that's what I'm gonna get.
Yeah.
And have you done, has there been any type of, I don't know if you've done any kind of work, any kind of analysis, any kind of budget, anything that shows that this is what they would do, this is the job study that they would do, that type of thing. Have you got anything of that, or?
So we'll be looking at comparable job descriptions and that when we actually advertise the position. But I've looked at rearranging the organizational chart that the assistant city manager will take over some departments, and I'll take over I'll maintain some departments, but until that position's here, the whole purpose is to take some of those departments off of me and put them out of Ken's hands and put them with the assistant city manager.
Okay. And the other thing I guess another question that I had with it was that I noticed that on the airport director, a lot of extra duties that he had was disseminated to other facilities, other places. And is that something that couldn't be done in your, I'm asking, I'm not,
I laugh because I don't think anyone realizes what happens up in my office, because it's not like I sit there and just answer phone calls. I'm reviewing development plans. I'm reviewing a lot of stuff because we don't have the total amount of staff in like planning and zoning and even in engineering and roadways. So my expertise that I have in public works is utilized to help review all those contracts, review all those development plans, meeting with developers. There leaves me little time to actually do work with all the meetings that I have to have. So I've got to split that up. There's just not enough hours in the day to make it happen.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. That's it for public comments. Next meeting date, Monday, July the 18th, 2022, to review the third quarter budget report. I assume everybody's okay with that.
Yes, I'll let you know. I'll just let you know now that I won't be here for the 18th, Ken. I may be on Zoom or I may be on the highway. If I'm on the highway, I'll have to be excused, but probably I'll be back in front of the computer, so
Oh, whatever, just be sure you communicate with Ken and let him know. Okay,
Absolutely.
so, because then he gets this to me for the meeting.
Yes,
okay?
sir.
And we'll go for next week. Next item on the agenda is adjournment of the meeting. Nothing else for the good of the order. We are adjourned.